Welcome to the Heliogenic Civ town call, a call where we explore infrastructures of generosity. And today in our call is Ronnie Portel, who's the founder of Hypha. And Ronnie will introduce Alpha now, and after that we will have like a small or long Q&A sessions about government infrastructures and probably DAOs and what it means for building a better civilization. I'm really looking forward to talk with you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you and Thomas for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I've just come off a big eclipse weekend. I got to see totality in Texas. There's nothing like a huge celestial event to realize that we're just grains of sand in this motion of the universe. And yeah, it was a great perspective to be reminded of. So I come off the back of that. So yeah, a bit of background for you, and then I'll take you through a few pages, and love for an interactive discussion so that we could go deep. A very brief background on myself. I was qualified as a lawyer, was an investment banker for many years, got very senior in that profession, and over a decade ago, I left to be a conscious capital entrepreneur, for want of a better word. And about 5 years ago, I realized tinkering with the existing system wasn't going to do it, and we needed something more dramatic, and that was my entry point into system change, as I think a lot of us understand it. So what happened 5 years ago? Well, a group of people came together with a common vision, and that common vision was our existing economic and governance systems are no longer fit for purpose globally. And we can build new ones to incentivize regeneration of the planet. And we can put them on our phone, and we can deploy it to all these authentically engaged people who are mentally and consciously already there around the world to drive real change. And this group of people came together as a decentralized team. It was the Einstein principle. We knew we couldn't build a new system from the old system. So us ourselves needed to be decentralized from the beginning. It wouldn't work if I was the CEO or any of us were the CEO. So we came together as a truly decentralized team, and we started to build an economic system. And that economic system was a self-governing currency, regenerative currency called seeds. And there was our first big mistake. We built a self-governing currency, and we didn't provide people with the means to govern it, the tools to govern it. And those tools didn't really exist 5 years ago. So in the background, we were building tools for ourselves, for our own team, to allow us as a decentralized group of people distributed truly globally across this planet to make agreements and to pay each other. And amazingly, we built those tools, and we used those tools to build those tools. So for 5 years, and the majority of the last 5 years, and that's only changed very recently, we didn't have a corporate entity or a bank account. Yet we managed to compensate over 150 contributors with well north of $10 million of value, and built technology product. So we're our best use case. We're our best sort of proof that you can do this outside the existing corporate infrastructure and banking system. And so we've used those tools ourselves for 5 years. And obviously on that journey, we realized, oh, wow, everyone else needs these tools as well. And we started to create a product out of that so that other people can use it. And we've really come at this, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail, but we've really come at this from the perspective of every human. The advent of blockchain as a technology is a game changer for humanity. The ability for us to interact and scale without middleman is something that arguably we have never done, except for we've always done it through indigenous wisdom and the indigenous tribes and how they have governed themselves. So yeah, let me take you into a little bit of Hypha and the governance protocols and what that means. It's been a beautiful journey in Hypha, and we still have a long way to go. And I truly believe we've entered the phase of radical collaboration. There are all you good people here on this call that I'm sure have been working on numerous projects over the past 5 years or 10 years or longer. And it feels like it's time to weave these pieces together. So really encourage an interactive discussion and, love the opportunity to share. So let me just share my screen. Go. Can everyone see that Hypha deck?
Yes.
Excellent. So Hypha, Hypha, Hypha is the node on the mice that facilitates connection. And that's what we're really here to do. We're really here to facilitate decentralized teams working together. And what does that mean? Well, it's essentially when you look at when people come together for a common purpose, they essentially typically need to do two things. They need to make agreements and they need to exchange value. And it's those few core pieces that we have done for ourselves over the past 5 years, which now we're looking to share with everyone else who is working hard on this regenerative renaissance. So we start with the concept of system change. It was really interesting, right? At the beginning of this journey, for me anyway, we would start by saying, hey, our existing systems are broken. They're no longer fit for purpose. And a lot of my old banking colleagues and other friends would look at me and go, nope, it's absolutely fine. And then obviously the pandemic happened and we would start by saying, hey, our existing system is broken, and everyone would nod their head and go, yeah, we know. And then they were more open to this concept that new systems can emerge, and these new systems that have been played with for a long time by numerous people are now starting to come into some form of maturity, where as we're accelerating into the change point that I think we all feel as a species, what we're really focused on is that beautiful sunrise the other side. And we understand that change is painful, and I think we can see that on our planet right now. It's an incredibly difficult time, and will likely get harder before it gets easier. But then it will release, and then there will be this dawn, and there will be these new systems that emerge. And the question for us is, do we want these systems to be dictated to us, or do we want these systems to be co-created by us? And that's the opportunity and the potential that we have in front of us. What's so special about working in a decentralized team? Why is it so different? The thesis is that if we can create the conditions for sensible collective decision making, then we hopefully create the conditions for the emergence of collective intelligence. And the base case is that I believe, and I think a lot of us believe, that we can solve our existential risks through collective intelligence. And this is a pathway to that. So I want to talk to you about how we think we get there. So the concept or the catch-all term that's used out there is DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. Now, that's a fine catch-all term, but it captures a lot of different types of organizations. What we're really focused on is what we call decentralized human organisms. So what that means is human beings can come together in non-hierarchical structures. So they're coming together in their divine sovereign being to execute a common purpose. So when you come together in sovereignty, you can't tell someone what to do and they can't tell you what to do. And so a lot of the issues with hierarchical structures get removed. How great, I'm not complaining about my boss anymore. Or as a boss, I'm not worried about what my team did on the weekend. And so it releases some pressures. Ideas are no longer stuck at the water cooler. They flow much easier. But it then creates, obviously, some other pieces that we need to address for ourselves. And I think one of the key ones is self-responsibility, which we can go into. But the way we've really thought about this is it's biomimicry. We've looked at nature's cell and said that this is the nucleus of the cell, and this is where we all, up to 150 humans can reside, the Dunbar number of effective cooperation. And we can vote on the budgets of a distribution of the capital into smaller circles. So this is some reflection of holacracy and sociocracy, so that the developers are voting on other developers. The marketing team are voting on other pieces of the marketing team, and then their overall budgets are voted on by the whole. So you have the right degree of engagement and experience going on in the voting sector. So that's what we call the action space. And this is what we envisage replaces the company ultimately. So, remember, the company is competitive, it's hierarchical, it's linear, and we're now moving to that space of cooperative networks, which is by their very nature are based in cooperation, but based in living systems and collective decision making. So what we then look to do is we then say, okay, well, we can wrap a community donut or community space around that core nucleus of the cell. And that community space can be 1,000 people, 100,000 people, 1 billion people. And we have this concept in Hypha of ecosystems. So myself as an anchor DAO can launch my own ecosystem of DAOs. And I can share the governance protocols that I put in place. I can share my economic incentive protocols that I put in place with my entire ecosystem. And that provides numerous benefits in terms of being able to invest. The term being used is ergodic investments now, where you can invest in ecosystems, and therefore the failures in the ecosystems benefit the whole, and that much more portfolio or approach allows for enhanced returns. The other things you have with blockchain and in the ecosystems is you have transparent and secure systems. And transparent and secure systems are the antithesis of tyranny and corruption. If you can see where all the money goes and everyone can see it, and you have a sensible governance structure in place, that's a game changer. You can deploy, I mean, we all know what 80% of the money that goes into NGOs and charities goes into the admin of those charities. And obviously there's a tremendous amount of corruption in our global institutions. These type of organizational structures with the blockchain behind it provide us with an unprecedented level of transparency and security, which changes the game. And then for us, as we move forward, well, we can envisage these ecosystems working together. And at Hypha, we don't prescribe a governance or an economic system. We provide a platform where you can experiment with your own economic and governance systems. So it's entirely tailored to your specific use case. But as we get ecosystems working together, well, then we believe, thriving networks, and we're moving into civilization shift. So that's our roadmap. And the exciting thing is we built this. We built it for every human. So most of the platforms that are focused on enabling collective decision-making don't really go into the holacracy and sociocracy detail. They're really just to allow a treasury to manage a group of people to manage a treasury, to buy, let's say, the US Constitution. This is more nuanced. This allows you to organize a group of people to affect and build things or create things akin to what the company does. And most of the products out there are focused on the early adopters of the decentralized finance world. So that's quite technical. Most of the planet does not know how to engage with that, how to manage public keys, or private keys, how to work with that DeFi technical space. So our goal has always been to build this so that every human or any human can use it, from someone executing a tech build platform like ourselves, where we're building tools for the next civilization, to the shea butter farmer in Africa. So there's a really broad cross-section of people that can use and deploy these platforms. We are endeavoring to solve the great Web3 challenge, which is to make this simple. We have a wallet which ensures the security. And the beauty is here is every vote is voted on and secured on the blockchain. And that means you have an accurate record of everything that happened. It can't be changed. It can't be manipulated. You know who voted on what. And that's very, very powerful in terms of allowing an organism to function and decentralized team to enter into trustless environments. Just to give you a little bit more depth on what happens in these circles that I was describing. So this is quite, what I don't know whether you call it third generation DAOs, fourth generation DAOs, or whatever the term is, but this is quite far advanced now in terms of holacratic and sociocratic principles being built into the technology to allow you to tailor it to your specific use cases. And while there are, I think, a couple of modules that we want to demystify from the Web3 world into our every human space to provide the complete picture, certainly the agreement machine and the value accounting piece of our journey is been well built. And ultimately, I said before, we're our best use case. How do these circles come together? I can tell you some interesting stories for a second. So we come together in councils. The councils don't have any specific voting power, and we separate voice and value, and I'll come to that in a bit more detail in a second. But these are voted on, these councils. And this is true decentralized voting. I've been a part of the DAO for 5 years, and I got voted out of the DAO for 9 months. I was calling out some things which I think were not being received at the time. As a result, I was voted out. I accepted that vote. I said, okay, that's the will of the DAO, I'm out. And then 9 months later, some things happened, which I guess were in line with my thinking, and the DAO came back to me and I rejoined. But I think this goes to show that, a senior member of the DAO can be voted out by the DAO. And I think that's a very useful fact pattern, even though at the time it was a pretty painful journey for me to go through myself. And so this quest for decentralization versus centralization, the other thing I would add just to soften the journey for everyone as we bring them into this sort of collective decision-making spaces, you don't have to give up all control to the decentralized team. So what's happened at Hypha is Hypha actually voted me and a couple of other team members to have what we call a North Star badge. And I'm still voted in to have that badge, but while I hold that badge, I can negate a positive proposal. So it's a bit like negative control in old world finance documents. So it's interesting how these DAOs governance evolve. Hypha is a living being. I very particularly call it a decentralized human organism rather than organization, because Hypha is its own thing now. After 5 years, it has its own identity, its own personality at this point. And that's what we're really birthing. We're birthing these collective human spaces. We do believe that obviously AI is incredibly important and valuable, but I also think a space for humanity where there's proof of humanity to come into that space, that the voting within these spaces is voted on by humans, and which I'm sure is informed by AI. So before I just go on to the voting thing, I just want to make one obvious point. Like, I'm talking about a tech system, I'm talking about voting. In order for us to come to harmony and to sort of solve these existential crises, it isn't just coming to a vote and pressing a button. In fact, that's probably the last step of collective decision making. I think it starts, and it needs to start, and we need to look back to the indigenous wisdom. Actually, it was Daniel Christian Wall that reminded me, how important this is. But I think we've always realized this, is that, it's about everyone coming together in ceremony, finding some coherence between each other, and then doing a lot of sense making, and then maybe ceremony again, and then sense making again, and then coming to your decision. So while I love to talk about technology, and I thought that would be the hardest bit of the journey, building the tech, obviously it's It's the education and all the things around using the technology, which are way more important. So, how we come together and make these decisions is more important than actually make the decision itself. I just want to make a couple more points and then open it up and maybe give you a few examples of where we are seeing early deployments and early concepts. So I mentioned briefly, we reward people with 3 kinds of token right now, which are built into our system: a utility token or the Hypha token. You can reward people in a dollar equivalent or a liquid token, for example, Bitcoin. And then we separate voice and value. So in the traditional world, if you own 51% of the company, you typically own 51% of the voting shares. Here, voice and value are earned separately. And when you earn voice, in our world, it's non-transferable and it decays over time. So always the people that are part of the nucleus of our cell who are busy working and engaged should have the majority of the voice and therefore are making most of the decisions. And this is, roadmap where it gets really exciting. I spoke about the currency token seeds. I would describe that as being in dirty growth for the past 5 years while the rest of the tech catches up. But that's having renewed momentum right now. But there are also many other currency tokens, gold-backed tokens out there that are really interesting to use. The other piece that's very important for us is the impact token. So the ability for any of these DAOs within the system, within an ecosystem, or any of these ecosystems, they will all be creating impact. And as they create impact, we want them to be able to mint an impact token, which will be very detailed in terms of its explicit understanding of what the impact is that was created. And so impact investors can come in and very clearly know the impact they are buying. And the degree of transparency and assuredness that you have that the capital is going to the right places, I mean, it's a complete game changer to our existing system. So that's a really exciting part of the next phase of our development. There's lots in that. It's like how you measure the impact, verify it, and then build it into the technology to allow everyone to mint it. Again, this is not something Hypha does on its own. We're a small part of a global movement here, all of which hold a cog in the wheel of the machine, or maybe a different cell or DNA piece of the organism that we're building together. Everyone here knows the size of the impact economy. I don't want to spend any more time there, and I'll stop sharing and pause for a second and just give you, I guess, maybe some ideas. I just went to the Eclipse Festival and I met an amazing guy, this guy, Mike Zuckerman. I hope I got his name right. And Mike works on the front lines of refugee camps.
Yeah, we know him.
All right. Oh, you know Mike?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Of course you do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I met him sitting drinking tea at the Eclipse Festival just a few days ago. And he's been putting in social spaces into refugee camps to allow them to have some form of space to come together and cohesion and build something for them. And we were talking, and I go, wow, what an amazing deployment of a DAO or a DO, a decentralized human organism. You can deploy an entity that has various roles and responsibilities for people to sign up to and get rewarded to do various things that the community needs. And you're allowing them self-determination at the same time. So if you can deploy DAOs for local farming, the local organic farm they want to put in, managing the power system, whatever those pieces happens to be that refugee camp would be, well, you're giving all of these people purpose and you're helping them help themselves. And all the money that then goes into those tasks, 100% of that cash is going to go in exactly to where you want it to go to. I mean, we sat drinking tea going, this is such a great use case for the DAO. So that's just one use case for it. But, we're looking at AI. Obviously, having the ethics of AI decentralized and transparent, really, really important. So the use of DAOs as we have the advent of AI. use of DAOs, across getting redevelopment capital back into the African continent is something that we've been very focused on, and ensuring that money goes to the right places again, and the people stewarding that capital do that in transparency. So I believe there'll be more DAOs than companies at some point. And we're still early on this journey. And Hypha, we've been living this decentralized decision-making for 5 years. And, I raised a lot of money as an investment banker, and I was considered very senior and old world conventionally successful. This is way harder than that. That's easy compared to getting humans to come together in the right way. But I'm usually optimistic, and I think rationally optimistic. I think there's a level of conscious awakening that we see everywhere. And that level of consciousness is what is required to work in these systems. If I put 100 bankers into a DAO tomorrow, that DAO will probably fail. But with all the people that I'm seeing that are doing the work on themselves through this transition, and we all know it's outer work and inner work simultaneously, I'm very, very, I would say I'm rationally optimistic about where we're headed, and all the signals lead to that beautiful sunrise the other side. Okay, I went way over my 20 minutes, so I'll definitely stop there. But I can go into depth on any of those topics, and really appreciate all your time.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. You have much more time than 20 minutes. You can talk for like an hour. It's more fine. Because actually, I like to circle back a little bit, because you were a lawyer, you were a banker, and usually like in the whole DeFi crypto, also seen as like they're kind of the bad guys, let's say. Okay. So I'm curious, like what was the inflection point in your career where you said, okay, this has to change, like we have to do things differently?
So I think I was always I wasn't meant to be a banker. I kind of fell into it and was chasing money, and I was good at it. So they kept paying and promoting me, and I kept jumping from bank to bank because someone else wanted me to pay me more to do the same thing, sure. But I would walk through airports, and I was on a plane most of the time, and I was based in Asia Pacific, pretty depressed. I'd walk through my trolley bag, and yes, there could be a pitch for $1 billion deal in there, or there could be, I don't know, a toy that I was selling. I mean, I was just a glorified traveling salesman. And so then I started to look at, okay, what actually am I doing? Oh, I'm raising billions of dollars for palm oil plantations. Where is this money going? I'm playing by the rules of the system. I'm looking around me. Oh, wow, people really aren't playing by the rules of the system. And I started to get more and more upset and frustrated and unhappy with what I was seeing. The Goldman's 1 MDB raping of Malaysia, I had a frontline seat to, and that happened, just before I left. And it was bewildering to me, with people with all this money and all this power, they would take money from a poor country's sovereign wealth fund that's there hopefully to improve the lives of the poorest people on that country, and literally steal from them. And to this day, the people that made the real decisions obviously have never been held to account. And I saw this across the industry. And I know maybe it's the Libra in me, it's that sense of fairness. It just all felt very, very uncomfortable. So, I mean, I didn't have this great vision of system change and regeneration. I don't think I'd heard the word then. I was definitely well behind Thomas, and I'm sure many of you in coming to this understanding. But I left in 2012, unhappy. I kind of got squeezed out with my stock, so I was very grateful, and went on that journey of coming from a very focused, myopic place where obviously I knew a lot about one thing and nothing about anything else, and just really stepped back and said, I know nothing, and just broadened my horizons very slowly over the course of a few years, and started co-founding businesses which I thought would be helpful and more productive. And yeah, look, there was this one moment in 2019 which was pivotal. I met a climate scientist, and whether it's the environmental debate, the climate debate, I don't really want. I think it's irrelevant. I think we can be agnostic over those issues to be some respect. We know we need change, but she had lost all climate hope. She was like, we had a connection, we had dinner in LA actually in October 2019, and everything I was working on wouldn't work, everything everyone else was working on wouldn't work, all of these ideas. I mean, she lost all climate hope. It was pretty startling, and it was a very depressing dinner for me. But she sent me an article, and while I was doing sort of my healing journey in Bali a month later, I read this article, and it was Transcending Our Existential Risks Through Collective Intelligence. It's a rather obscure article on Medium, and influenced by the work of Jordan Hall and Daniel Schmattenberger and all of these other great thinkers. And literally, I read that and got a download of some description through reading that and the vision and the journey that I've been on since. So, literally a month later, I basically had that vision of, an economic and governance system to incentivize regeneration of our planet. And then woke up and said, I'm going to do nothing with this idea. It's way too big. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, I don't know anything about, I was a lawyer, kind of, banker, yeah, but didn't enjoy it. I mean, what do I know about these things? And then a month later, obviously met all the people that also had the same vision and wanted to achieve the same thing, which was, that I don't believe in coincidences, they're more coincidences. So yeah, that was kind of my journey into it.
Oh, wow. You also had like kind of a Steve Jobs moment, I would say, because you built a company that you really love. You had like this vision for Hypha, and then one of the DAOs kicked you out. How was that like journey for you? Like they kicked you out and they said, hey, this is not, you don't follow our vision anymore. And then they got back to you.
Yeah, certainly not comparable to Steve Jobs in any way. But yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to keep grounding and remembering is that while you see my face on the screen, it's not about me. It's about the Hypha team. We're a collective. We make decisions together. So while I'm representing it here, I'm just one of 5, 6 more senior people, I guess you would consider. And we all have different skill sets, and we all have blind spots, which we all come together and protect or support. So that's a beautiful thing. And I really love working with a lot of smart people on a common cause. There's nothing more enjoyable. That's the thing that gets me going the most. Wow, this guy's so smart at this specific thing. Awesome. Let's plug him in. That's, that's the best. But yeah, I mean, I came into the DAO right at the beginning, and I'm fortunate, right? I'd been on that journey of a conventionally successful career. I was a senior guy in the old world system. So when I came out of that, I really rejected ego in a sense, and maybe too much, and bringing that back in a healthy way now. But I really believed that I was in a really privileged position because I had nothing to lose. So I would be the one in the DAO saying no the most. I would be the one bringing up the hard conversation that no one wants to bring up, because I always felt, well, I got nothing to lose here. Like, if I'm not going to be fully expressed, which I think is also a really important piece of anyone showing up in these collective decision-making processes, you need to say what you feel and believe. I can say the things that people are not afraid to say, and I was really kind of felt quite empowered to do that. Now, I was also then calling out Founders Challenge of another one of the co-founders, and we don't really, I don't really like the co-founder titles or founder titles. We try to avoid them because it's not really relevant. We're all there on the journey, but yes, there are people with more experience in the team for sure. And I was calling out to one of the co-founders challenge. He's amazing in many ways, but was making decisions for all kinds of things and had a lot of voice and didn't have the ability to do that, or capability, I felt, to do that. And I would bring it up and say it. And in calling out Founders Challenge, you risk that person obviously voting you out, and him together with another person had the significant amount of voice at that time to block me participating. And yeah, voted me out, and it was brutal. It was brutal. I mean, I got voted out, and I immediately accepted it. The first thing I did was accept it. I was like, okay, this is it. I'm not going to fight this. If this is the will of the DAO, journey isn't easy anyway. So if I've got an escape clause here and I don't need to figure out how complicated all of this is, maybe I'm not meant to be here. So I just took it at that. And I left the DAO saying all the things that I felt were important, like, number of people shouldn't have been there. I felt weren't right for the DAO. I felt some of the direction we were going in didn't make sense. Some of the structures didn't make sense. And 9 months later, the team came back. Things were fracturing in the DAO. And I was able to come back and, bring, some leadership and, importantly, leadership without control. And that's the key here. People don't have to listen to me, even though I like to talk so much.
Yeah, you said like in your presentation that we have like kind of a coordination problem, and that is actually what Hypha tries to solve. And then you also said like from indigenous wisdom, it's very important that like actually going a few steps, let's say to the like back and like how to make actually decisions in a group, or how to make like governments actually. And I was thinking like, did we kind of like unlearn as a society how to make decisions or how to vote?
Yeah, I think we did. I think that's it. I think we've lost the art of ceremony and sense making. The power is not in the decision. When you come to make a vote, for me, you should already know how that vote's going to go and how everyone's going to vote, because you've come together in ceremony to create coherence. I think that's really important. Like, you need to come together, the people that are coming together to make that decision. And then you need to do a ton of sense making. And if 9 people are voting for something and 1 person is voting against it, let's give the space to the 1 person voting against it. I really want to hear what they see that we don't see, and allow space for that alternative opinion to sway you. And I qualified as a barrister, so I really believe in the power of argument and the power of discussion to come to. You're not always going to come to a consensus, and you can have various voting parameters. We use 80-20 in our DAO, so 80% positive vote and a quorum of 20% of the vote showing up to make that decision. You can make that whatever you want. You can make that consensus. But I believe if you're doing the sense making with an open heart, with a true desire to be convinced otherwise of the opinion that you hold going into that space, and everyone is working on that basis, well, something quite powerful is happening. And this is where we're starting to get into this point of collective decision making, creating the conditions emergence for collective intelligence. There's something interesting happening where, when the DAO makes decisions, some of the decisions it makes I don't agree with, yet had I been the CEO, we would have made them. And yet that decision later on proves to be, a stellar decision. But it's leaving that space for you to know. There's a really powerful quote, and I'm going to get this wrong. It's not the knowledge. It's a Daniel Boorstin quote, but it's essentially it's not the it's the illusion of knowledge which is the challenge that we face. It's not knowledge itself. So that illusion, it's knowing what we don't know, and knowing we don't know it. It's so powerful when you come into this space. Sorry for that butchered quote, but I'll clean that up later.
Yeah. Now, how do you make like DAOs in general easier for users?
I think I would describe us as 80% of the way there from the tech perspective. Okay. So, removing your custody of your key is both a blessing and a curse, right? It means that no one else can interfere with you and no one else can control you. But it also means you have the responsibility to be in charge of those keys yourself. And that is a challenge. So we've definitely done a great job on the onboarding flow and getting people into a Web3 space without them feeling like they're writing down long, complicated keys and try to keep them in a safe and all the things you need to do. And we've also got a really cool key recovery system, which allows you to recover your keys with 3 of your friends or family, and other systems which are making this more user-friendly. It's in the technology is one part, but again, as I said before, it's actually the smallest bit now that we're getting to the end of something which I think is very usable for everyone. It's really about the education. It's really about, that concept of the ceremony, the sense making, the coming together, the talking, giving people the confidence and the ability to say no, ensuring that you're bringing the right people into the space and they have the right level of consciousness. We're still really early on this, for sure. But I think AI is is a big driver of more people waking up to the importance of DAOs, because it's really, really important when we're talking about managing AI. Because as we've seen, the AIs take on the personalities of the people that wrote it. And if they are a centralized entity, well, then we're getting, Sam Altman or Yuri's view of the world, which is, a very narrow perspective on what's required for this regenerative renaissance. And I think that's really kind of pushed things along a little bit in people's understanding.
Yeah, I fully agree. Before I ask much more question, Claudine, Thomas, Niels, do you have any questions to Ronnie?
Oh, yes. So Niels, if you don't mind, I get started.
Go for it, Claudine.
So thanks, Ronnie. Very interesting. I also was 20 years in financial services, and my background is law. I know the loneliness of the business class, and I've been based in Asia Pacific for a while, so I can relate to a lot of what you said. And I left 2017 out of very similar considerations, what you described. Sort of about 2 years ago, I, for various reasons, got closer to DAOs. And I walked away at the time, and you're saying it's early days and there's development and so, but I walked away sort of feeling it was an attempt to sort of squeeze the inner development needed into technology in the hope that the inner development would then automatically occur. And there was sort of some disappointment that, that didn't happen actually. And that, like there was, I think you described it a bit, that the important thing is actually the education and the ceremony and the sense making. And I actually, so that was more a comment, and I would be interested though in the view of the group, like with the example that you brought with the being voted out. Right, and looking at it from an indigenous perspective, the elders would be there to say things that maybe youth or would not like to hear, and they have a very important function doing that. And is voting out then a good thing? Right, and how could these things? Because everything you said about like what you brought in to sort of question things and so. That I think is very important, and I would feel very uncomfortable that in these governance structures these people are voted out, because that's then not so different to what we actually currently have in the old system. And what I've experienced a lot in corporate. I also had like controversial opinions often, and no one likes to hear them, right? So that would be maybe like your take on that particular piece would be my first question, and then I leave it to Neil.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I mean, you've kind of gone straight to the heart of one of the toughest things that we deal with. I think the first thing to say is we've been doing this and living this truly for 5 years. I don't know many people that have been doing that in DAOs. I think we're one of the real few, and we're on purpose. We're wanting to achieve a goal. We haven't got it right yet. This is still, we provide a template system. Someone will use our technology in a way that we haven't even considered yet. What we are doing through the course of that journey, though, is every failure, every mistake, every issue that comes up, our goal is to integrate that into the technology over time so that everyone else doesn't have to go through the journey that we went through. So all the mistakes that we've made, everyone else can benefit from, right? And that's our goal. Now, more specifically to that issue that you brought up, so what happened as a result of that journey? Well, the North Star badge got created, which is this tool to allow me plus one other North Star badge holder we can together block a positive proposal that's being voted on by the DAO. We can't make something happen, but we can stop, money being spent in the wrong place, for example. And so that feature didn't exist until I got voted out and went through that painful journey, and then kind of, came back and, helped shape it going forward again. So through every sort of hurdle, mistake, pain point, we look and evaluate, does this warrant a solution that is in the technology or a protocol or something that can help here? And, we have a long list of things that we want to weave into the technology, and it's all optional for people to use or not use. And so it's a really interesting thing, right? A decentralized team are voting for more centralization for a period of time. And I get revoted into the North Star badge, and they revote me in for it. And what happens when I have the North Star badge? Well, how many times have I used it? 0. But of course, right? Because it should all happen in the ceremony and sense making anyway. And if I'm the outlier, well, then I've made my case. And if you're in an honest and open environment, then my case has been heard, and either people have come to my point of view, or I have understood that I'm not, it's not in the same, I don't share the same view, which is okay too. So we're endeavoring to layer these pieces in. It was very interesting. Daniel Christian Wall, I mentioned before, he introduced me to Thomas. I think the night before we spoke at a conference, I'd met for the first time, and I was really excited. I was like, oh man, this guy's one of the heroes of this Renaissance. So I'm like, oh, hey, you're into a lot of work. We're building this tech, and he was not interested in what I had to say, because he's like, you technology guys, you're coming at it, and you think it solves by technology. You're wrong. And I was like, okay, you need to hear my talk. And then he heard the talk, and then we bonded, and he realized that we're not coming at this from the Silicon Valley perspective at all. The vibration, the frequency, or whatever you want to put it, this is completely different. And yeah, we're very mindful of the pieces that you describe, and these are some of the things that we're enacting. And there's lots more we can enact, and tools that you can enact to help you as a group of people coming together. The other piece that's really important, and I mentioned right at the beginning on this coherence, is just bringing people together for a common purpose. Like, amazingly, the senior team at Hypha are the same senior team pretty much for the last 5 years. Wow. And it's been a rough 5 years. It's been hard, right? We've gone through, financing challenges, tech challenges, all the challenges that you would expect on the journey. And we're hyper resilient. Why? Because we're all united around the common purpose. And that's really, really powerful. We are all on purpose. No matter how much we disagree, no matter how much we fight, no matter how much we fall out with each other and then come together and hug it out and all of these things, what doesn't change is consistent throughout all of that is our purpose. And that's one thing I do encourage all DAOs to think about very, very clearly as they set up, is defining your purpose and ensuring alignment on purpose. That's everything. If you don't have that, the DAO will fall apart for sure. So that goes some way to answer the question, Claudine, but it's a big question, and almost our entire mission really to help figure these things out.
Yeah, I think it's, just in the discussion, because, Daniel, is the reaction, sort of, I think, why is it, and I think and he's from Munich, by the way, too. So he's, sort of, because the impression I think people often get is that not enough attention is then paid to the importance of the level of consciousness, of the amount of inner work necessary to, that it can only come together, like if both pieces, like the technology and the inner development sort of, or it becomes really beautiful, the higher the level of consciousness is of the participants in the DAO. That will be my, and then it can work. And a lot of people are not there, I think.
You couldn't be more right. Okay, so this is 100%. I mean, I agree completely. I think more people are there than we think, and every day that's accelerating. Obviously, what's going on with maps and psychedelics and conscious awakening and deep trauma and healing across the planet is all driving an increased level of consciousness across this planet, which is a beautiful thing. But yeah, we need to. This all goes hand in hand. I don't think it's a coincidence that as we're approaching some form of AGI, we're also discovering more of our human superpowers as we sort of consciously awaken, and then we are able to come together as we have done for centuries in collectives to be able to decide our future, but also in sovereignty. So, these are beautiful coincidences happening. And if you want to read some of the tea leaves there, you can kind of feel that this is coming together, and we're accelerating, into that change point. But yeah, look, this is all about that. And when last year was a tough year for I think a lot of people in Web3, and Hypha was no different. And by the end of the year, what did I do? I was like, well, I can't do anything more outward. Well, time to go on that inward journey. And I did a pretty intensive inward journey, and then sort of taken the last 3 months to integrate that out. And then now I'm back to see what reflection that's had on my outward journey. So we all have that. Yes, it's integral to everything that we are doing. And yeah, I just share this with you. I think it's really interesting, is that when I share what we're doing, hey, building a new economic governance system for generation of the planet, and I get one of two reactions. I share what we're doing, and within the first pretty much 30 seconds of sharing it, no matter whether I'm on form and sharing it in a beautiful way, or I'm a bit tired and haven't shared it so well, there are two categories of people. There is the category that their eyes just go bright and they go, holy shit, you guys have built what? This exists? There are people doing this? Oh my God, this is amazing. And they feel it throughout their entire body and they get super excited. And then there's the category of, whether that person is a smart person, experienced in the field and banking or whatever it is or not, no matter how much I explain it to them, and no matter how smart they are, they're just, asking the, smart questions about why it won't work, or why this doesn't work, or why this doesn't make sense, or why is this not needed. And what I've realized, I think, and finally maybe learning the lesson after 5 years, is even those doors that you think should open, that they don't, and that you're sitting and you're explaining and you're going, oh, this guy's such an amazing smart human, or this woman is amazing smart human, they must be able to, they will get it if I just keep going. I've learned to stop, because if in the first 30 seconds there are so many people that the door swings wide open, they're bright-eyed and they go, wow, holy shit, this is it. So look for the bright-eyed, because I think there are a lot of bright eyes out there who are ready for this.
Niels, you had some questions, or Claudine?
Yeah, a ton of questions, but first, I like to just say that it's really interesting what you've been doing, and extremely fun to see how this is kind of possible to do in spite of country borders, distances, generations, and culture, which is just completely marvelous, and I'm loving it. So I had a little look while you were talking also on the constitution of Hypha to to in a way see a little bit also on the challenge between what we are creating as systems in a human world and towards the natural systems which are in a way completely surrounding us. In the natural systems, you kind of have principles which is kind of repeated in different ways, creating conditions conducive to life, where there are also limitations on what kind of materials that are useful and which can afterwards be regenerated as nutrition for other activities. So in a way, there is both a kind of freedom, but there is also a kind of frame which allows things to not create so many innovation mistakes as we have been kind of doing as human beings. So I was just so I searched for biology or principles kind of based on biology in the Constitution, and there was one referral that I could find in order to explain the difference between a mechanical system and a biological system. So I was just wondering, I think a lot of the future solutions are also based on making the biological principles and framework as a kind of a default system, which works in spite of a majority vote. Because in a way, even if the majority or everybody agrees on it, it might still be wrong in spite of its relevance and value towards other living species and natural systems surrounding us. So to get to the question, are there any ways of kind of implementing biological systems or the understanding between what is freedom, but within some kind of physical material design or energy principles that we already know is kind of working through nature?
So I think the first thing I would say is shout out to Anna-Lois Smithson, who led the work for our constitution, and that was a more than a year process for us to come together with that. And like all of these documents, they're living. So we will continue to go into that and address that. And I think you raise a really good point on, how much of the reflection of nature, biomimicry, and our pieces within that are reflected in the document. So I think that's a really great note for us to take forward, first of all, because I think there should be, because it is there and part naturally of Hypha, so it should be expressed in that document. So I think it is very much present for us. How to bring it in more than we have? I mean, we are designing the systems and providing the frameworks and platforms for people to come in to experiment. And with, as I said, we're sort of copying the nucleus of the cell concept. And I think, I really believe in transparency, right? I really think that's for a specific use case of regeneration of the planet. If we can all work as a cooperative network and we can see what each others are doing, like the plant kingdom can do in the forest, and send the nutrients to the right places and share and work together, that's a game changer. And so I think the system itself, if everyone works in transparency, and so in our network, that's what we want people to do, it's a game changer, because I can drop into another DAO and go, oh, hey, I saw you guys talking about this. We're doing this. How about it's open source? Why don't you just use this? Or, hey, we had this issue. This is how we help. And because we're all part of the same ecosystem or we're part of the same network, that value is coming back to me anyway. So we're all kind of helping each other. So I think transparency has a large part to play in that. I need to be mindful because there are really important places where transparency is needed. It is unhelpful. So if you're in a war-torn country and there's a vote and you lose, they tend to go around and kill the people who voted against them, things like that. So there's obviously places of importance for privacy and voting. But in a place where you're comfortable being completely transparent, then I think we flow in line with nature more, and we're able to help and come in, and we're working as that cooperative network. But I feel as well, my answer to you is like a tenth of the answer. And that the rest of that 90% of that answer is something that needs to get into a cooperative exploration to go deeper on. I mean, we know that we've sort of taken things from cells and design, and we're continually going back to plants, and we're also living in nature, and you know, a lot of people are executing this from being situated in the jungle and things like that, which is really important. But there's there's a lot more to, I think. There's clearly a lot more of the intelligence from the plant world, that while we have some of it and some inspiration, and you know, obviously we're aspirational in this intent, I can imagine the scale of what we know, the scale of what we don't know is way, way, way bigger than what we do know. So I think work in progress, not all the answers you want there, Niels, but recognition.
Very, very well said. Would it be possible to kind of see some examples from projects that has been running where you find that the kind of discussion led towards biological strategies or principles that in a way enlightened the whole DAO?
I mean, our best example is always us. So we always go to Hypha. Like, we've been using the tools for the longest. We've deployed all the capital. We've made all the agreements through it. I think the nature of decentralization not being this panacea for everything, all right? I think that is something that has come to me, because even the forest centralizes, decentralizes, it comes together. Like, it's not all about, I think, you know, us coming together as sovereign beings is really important, but then I can vote some centralization during a different point in the life cycle of an organism. And I think recognizing that this is a living system, and we're not stuck in this old world linear corporate structure, and we're now in this living, evolving system, means that you don't have to wed yourself to that structure. And in fact, at Hypha, it's been radical, right? At times, we've gone, okay, we tried this voting method, and we tried this, and you know what? It's not really working. Let's blow it up. We're all starting again. We're all starting with the same amount of voice, and we're trying it this way, and we're earning voice differently this way. I mean, you know, like my banking colleagues and, you know, my training from my banking days, I mean, you know, I could not reconcile what we were doing. I mean, it was insane. Like, you shouldn't, you never do that. So there's a lot of faith put and trust put in the alignment that we have on purpose, and allowing, I think Hypha is really important that we do this. I don't feel that everyone needs to go that journey, right? We're blowing up the governance system at the beginning every 3-6 months and going, well, that didn't work, let's try this. I think we're doing that so that other people don't have to, because it's quite brutal doing that. It requires a lot of trust between individuals, because there's no documentation. This, you know, it's you know, the code and the token is law, if you like.
But is there a way where also kind of the value for nature is a token or has value? You know.
Yes. So
Yep.
that impact framework, that impact token, that is the space. Just, I mean, nature in its broad term, including humans, right, is what is the positive impact? So if that can be defined, measured, and there are various amazing people around the planet doing that for soil and water and air, and we're going to be able to measure all of these things. And if you can then measure the positive impact, you can assign a value to that. So yes, that impact token creation is really important to our system, because then all the ecosystems of DAOs, yes, they're creating value, traditional value, but they're also creating impact value. And it's so direct. I can see that, oh, you guys went to this refugee camp. I can see the refugee camp. I can see the organic farm starting. I can see it. And I know that, oh, I put a bit of capital in. I'm confident putting more capital in. All right. So I think that's why I went back to that period, that there are certain circumstances where transparency will really work. And I think, look, we're going to have, what, 1 billion people, depending upon the numbers, moving north on our planet. We're about to have a refugee crisis beyond anything we have ever imagined. We need to come up with deployable strategies to give these people, help people find their purpose and become productive in their own communities and become communities. And I think that is just a key challenge for us, because if we do not do that, yeah, you can hide away in your bunker if you want, but is that the world you want to live in? Well, no. So, you know, people say, oh, you know, not everyone's as altruistic as you, Ronnie. I'm not altruistic. I'm entirely selfish. I want to be able to walk outside my door, and I don't want someone to, come up to me with a knife to, take my shoes. Right. And the best way to do that is to, put people in healthy environments and provide them, with the opportunity for purpose and being productive.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ronnie. I think that's it. Or any other questions?
No, I just leave you then maybe with a Lenin quote, which I do remember, which is, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And we are accelerating into this change point. And this is happening very, very slowly, and it's very challenging. And then it's all of a sudden it's going to happen very quickly. And I do believe that there are growing and enough people that have been working on various bits of the system across the planet. And we are in the radical collaboration phase of coming together, finding the use cases, finding the other bits of technology which we'll need to bolt together to provide a new economic and governance system. And yeah, while it's been a long 5 years, I remain amazingly excited, enthralled, and, seeing the beauty in the interactions of the people in this movement. It's an amazing thing to see.